Hello and welcome to A Spirited Debate. I'm Lauren Green, Chief Religion Correspondent for Fox News Channel. On October 2nd, 2006, a mild-mannered man named Charlie Roberts, husband and father of 3 young children, burst into an Amish schoolhouse. He was well-armed with guns and ammo. He ordered the teachers and the boys to leave and proceeded to tie up the 10 young girls. As police surrounded the one-room schoolhouse, Roberts shot all 10 girls and then himself. Wanton violence against the peaceful Amish stunned the world, but what was even more stunning is the forgiveness that the Amish showed Robert's wife, Marie. Now, Marie has kept silent for all these years until now. She married, moved a few miles away, and has written a book called One Light Still Shines. And Marie Monville joins me now on A Spirited Debate. Thank you so much, Marie.
Thank you for having me.
Well, first of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. People often ask me, does it get easier? Do you forget about it? And I won't ever forget about it. But with the passage of time, there are things to celebrate as well as things that we still mourn.
Yeah, you will always carry that around with you. But time does heal a few of those wounds.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes.
And speaking of time, it has been 7 years since this shooting, and all of us in the news remember it. It was just the most horrifying thing. Why did it take you 7 years to write this book?
Initially, in the aftermath of that, it was so widely reported on through the news media. It just felt to me like I didn't have anything else to say that wasn't already being said. And as time has gone by and our family has found healing and wholeness in life, I've been asked to share my story, with church groups and women's conferences. And whenever I do that, people come up and talk to me afterwards to talk about the pain that they're going through and, the deep valleys and dark places that they're facing. And they always have asked, are you going to write a book? And it was something that I thought a lot about. And then around the 5th anniversary, started to think about it a little bit more. And it seemed like it wasn't just about telling my story, but it was about sharing the hope that I've found and the light that I found, the love of God that I found that has so impacted my life, with the hope that I can give away what I've received.
Is that the grand purpose you talk about in finally deciding to write this book? There was a grand purpose that God has for you.
Right. For me to think that God could redeem the circumstances of my life, if He can take all of these broken pieces and make something beautiful out of it, how could He not do that for everyone else?
Yeah, the irony of that morning is that you were actually leading a prayer group at your church, praying for the safety of children.
Yes.
This has got to be the most horrific thing to be thinking, God didn't answer my prayer. I mean, you're the one who should be enraged at God.
I believe that God hears every prayer, and I do believe that He answers them. It doesn't always happen the way we think it's going to, or sometimes the way we hope, but I don't think that our circumstances are an indication of whether or not He's answered, specific prayers.
Yeah, what was that morning like for you?
It was a gorgeous morning. It was Indian summer kind of day. It was very warm. The sky was clear. The windows were open. We could hear the sounds of harvesting going on, in the neighboring farms. And we walked the kids down to the bus stop that morning. Charlie gave the kids a kiss and said, "I love you." And, it didn't have any of the markers of a terrible day. It looked like everything was good.
Then everything changed. I mean, there was just no indication before. And then when you finally found out what was happening, what was going through your mind?
When I got that call from Charlie and he said, "I'm not coming home," I knew from the sound of his voice that I would never see him again. There was just something so different, so lifeless about the way he spoke to me. I had no idea what that was going to mean. And so on one hand, I was listening to the things he said, and at the same time, I was still trying to wrap my mind around the first sentence.
I know you've been asked this question a lot, and I'm sure people listening to this interview are asking the same question. Why? Why did this happen? Is there any reason that you can think of that he did this?
In the letter, he alludes to the reasoning behind it being the loss of our first daughter. She was born premature and only lived for 20 minutes. And so in some way, he felt like he was getting back at God for the loss that we had sustained.
But why take it out on other children? Why would that somehow help?
I really don't know, and I don't think that's a question that anyone can understand. There were so many things that he said that day, either in the letter or on the phone to me, that just didn't make any sense. And I don't think someone who was in the right frame of mind would really be able to understand the logic that he thought, in the moment.
In hindsight, and I think you have talked to sociologists or psychologists and saying that he probably was suffering from some kind of clinical depression. Is that what was happening?
He would go through bouts of depression periodically that I knew were related to the loss of our first daughter, but they didn't keep him from going to work, and he was still able to interact with our family. They didn't change his behavior in any kind of marked way. It would last for a couple days, and he would come out of it. As much as I encouraged him to seek help, whether it be through a counselor or a doctor, our pastor, a friend, someone, he always said that he could handle it on his own. And so when I've talked with counselors about that, they suggested that those bouts of clinical depression resulted in a psychotic break.
Our most recent shooting in this way is the Sandy Hook. When that broke, did that recall memories for you? Did that sort of bring back all of the pain?
I think every time I hear about a shooting, it kind of takes me back to that moment. And I can feel so much for those families that, your world changes in an instant and you don't know what that's going to look like, and you don't really know even how to breathe in those moments. And so my heart goes out to all the families that are affected by the shootings.
One of the things that happened after the shootings that was really stunned us all, the Amish, they actually came to you. They offered forgiveness. They came to Charlie's funeral when nobody else really would.
Right. Within the first few hours after the shooting, several Amish men were walking down the street. I could see them from the window at my parents' home, and they came in the driveway and spoke with my father. I could see their arms being put around my dad and their hands resting on his shoulder. And when he came inside, he told us that they said they had forgiven Charlie, and they were extending compassion and grace over our family, that they were concerned about me and my children, and they really wanted to come as soon as they were able to see how we were doing. And then at the funeral, they came again. I didn't know they would be there. It was a total surprise, but it was such beauty and grace again in that moment as we came into the church and saw the cameras and saw reporters. And I'm thinking to myself, how are we going to be able to have this private moment of grief, just our family? And then as we came around the corner, saw Amish people walking towards us. They kind of formed a crescent-shaped wall and moved so our car could drive through. And once we drove through, they stood back in line, and the only thing that could be seen were their backs. You couldn't see us at all from the street.
Wow, that is incredibly powerful. You talk about your walk-on water moment. What was that about?
That afternoon, I knew that my world was changing, and I knew that everything I ever knew to be true about my life was over. And I had no idea what that meant. I was in a place of complete and total desperation, and I knew that I had two choices. I could either choose to believe that the God that I read about and loved in the pages of the Bible, that I'd heard people testify to in church or otherwise, was entirely true, and somehow he would come to rescue our family, or I could choose to believe that we were going down like the fastest sinking ship, and even though I couldn't comprehend a way for him to rescue us, I knew that I had nothing to lose by trusting the Lord. And so I kind of just threw myself upon the Lord and said, God, I trust you. I don't know what this looks like, and I don't know what you can do with this, but do something with it. And I think that conversation with God was the moment that set my life on the path that has taken me to where I am now.
Well, the book is called, it's a wonderful book, One Light Still Shines. Marie Monville, thank you very much for being on Spirit Debate. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Powerful story.
Thank you.
All right. And that is it for this episode of Spirit Debate. Thank you so much. I'm Lauren Green.